Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Leah and this is True Crime and Beauty on Tuesdays. Every Tuesday I try to upload a case that I've been looking at. Usually once you start going into true crime, cases just start popping up. But what I have been doing is first I started in the American Horror Stories, kind of seeing what was based off of fact and reality versus what wasn't. And I grabbed the ones that were from reality and I put them into videos and telling you about the backstory of them. And now I'm on to like movies, what made these movie characters come to life, kind of jump off the screen at you because they were based on reality. If this is something you would like, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If at the end of the video you liked it, go ahead and don't forget to leave a big thumbs up. You can also leave a comment or even tell me what kind of things you want me to brush on or tell a story on. That's what I do. I sit down and I'm telling you a story. So grab a snack because today we are covering 10 Rillington Place in Notting Hill. I will be telling you what I'm using on my face as we go along. That might give you like a little break in between what I'm talking about. I hope it doesn't disrupt you too much, but if it does, let me know because I haven't really thought about if I'm going to just list it on the screen or list it down below or just keep listing it in my video. So today we're going to be using the Too Faced Superfine Brow Detailer, and my shade is soft black. I do like my brows darker, but in certain ones I use other colors too. So let's get started because I need some brows. Born before 1900 clicked over on the calendar. He was born in 1899, John Christie. He was actually born April 8th of 1889, and he was born John Reginald Halliday Christie. He was born to Ernest John Christie and Mary Hannah Halliday Christie. Now I'm probably not going to say this right, but he was born in North Ram, United Kingdom. His parents were like pretty young when they got married, and his father was, surprise, surprise, abusive. This seems to be like a pattern. And his mom, and he not only fell to the abuse of his dad, but his mom was no piece of cake either. She was just domineering, and so were his sisters. He just had to deal with it coming from all kinds of angles. Now, this has caught my attention, but I really don't understand it all that well. But they said that he went to his grandfather's funeral. It was his mom's dad, I believe, and it was an open casket, and they said that was really traumatizing for him. He was about 8 years old when this happened. And I do understand that funerals can be very traumatizing to children. I have been to my fair share, especially even as a child. And I do know that they're traumatizing. And it was an open casket, but most funerals that I have been to have been open casket unless there has been like preconceived type of situations where there can't be open casket or the person has already been cremated prior. But anyways, they said that this had an effect on John, and he was just, this traumatized him. So everybody deals with trauma differently, first of all, so we're not going to judge, we're just going to go along with it. For our eyes, we're going to dip into these fun little pots from Beauty Creations. And I have After Dark, and I have Hendrix right here. So John was like really a smart little kid, okay? And so much so that at 11 years old, he won a scholarship. He won a scholarship. Yeah, he did. So that's kind of awesome. But he won a scholarship to the Halifax Secondary School. And that was like a big deal, and it's pretty prestigious. And he actually really excelled in math and algebra, and he also was really good at like fine detailed work. Yeah, so he was doing pretty dang well. They did find out that he had an IQ of 127. I don't know if that's high, or 128, I think it was. I don't know if that's high, but good for him. I've never taken an IQ test. Might be fun. I will say that he did sing in the choir, and though he had all of these things going for him, he was bullied. Like, he just didn't fit in. And that's pretty kind of sad. You know, I hate hearing people being bullied. I don't tolerate for that. For some reason, as he grew into puberty, he associated with sex and death together, and he felt like that was an arousing thing. It doesn't specify as to why. It just says that that's what, from everything that I had looked through, it just said that that's what he had really, that's how he got his kicks, you know? It was just interesting to him. Everything went together like that. And he enjoyed not just the associating sex and death, but also like dominance and aggression. And if he couldn't get that, it did render him impotent, so he couldn't perform. So I'm sure you can imagine that didn't go well when he was younger with his first sexual experiences, because I'm pretty sure young girls can be kind of little jerks when it comes to that kind of stuff. And these young ladies that he was having intercourse with were no different in being jerks, because his first sexual experiences were literally a bust, and I don't mean like it was like in the good kind of way, if you get what I'm saying. So it rendered him with some pretty crappy nicknames. And you ask what those nicknames were? Well, Reggie No Dick. Yeah, he did go by Reg or Reggie Christie for that's what people knew him by. And so yeah, he got called Reggie No Dick. That sounds super nice, doesn't it? I'm sure a pubescent boy really would enjoy that nickname. And he also got labeled Can't Do It Christie. Another great term that I'm sure a young man of his age would just super, super enjoy being called that. Yeah, I hope you can hear the sarcasm in my voice, because, I mean, that's pretty crappy. I'm positive that did not go over well for him. He also had this health, it is a health disorder. It's like a mental disorder where he was a hypochondriac. But he was a purposeful hypochondriac. He did it to get attention. And he felt like if he could get that type of attention, any attention was good attention when it came to him. And so he would fake illnesses to get attention. Also, if you use these little pots, you have to work fast with them, just so you know. Later on, after he got old enough, he decided that he was going to enlist in the military forces as a signalman. And that was very, very, very common. And he ended up being in World War I. Yeah, the first one. However, that was not very long-lived, because he got a mustard attack. And not like mustard you squeeze. If you aren't aware, mustard is a gas. And he ended up becoming very ill from that, and he used that to his advantage, knowing that mustard gas was really dangerous. He actually used that to say that he had temporary blindness. He went mute for a little while, and nobody really knows if that was really true or if it was just something that John was putting on. Because remember, he was known for making up stories when he was younger. So what changed? So nothing. He could have just been making this up, or he could have been legitimately having these issues. But at the ripe age of 22, he did meet a young lady. Yeah, and fell in love. Good for you, John. Found a nice little lady to fall in love with. And her name was Ethel Waddington. And she was from Sheffield. And they got married May 10th of 1920. But pretty much right from the start, this marriage was rough. It was no fun. It was not a good one. It was not a good match. I guess dating, it was a great match, but once they got into marriage, it was not a good match because they really couldn't have sex unless he was in total control. And yeah, Ethel really wasn't into all that. She was not vibing that total control type of situation. She was not feeling that at all. And of course, if he didn't have total control, he could not perform. And thus, this was causing marital problems with them. They weren't taking on the till death parts us kind of thing. So there was no doubt that at some point in time he turned to prostitutes. It was just that simple. He turned to prostitutes. Nay, neither way. That's how he thought he could get his kicks off. And that's pretty much how he did get his kicks, was with prostitutes. Because with them, you paid for a certain thing and you would get what you pay for. Now, him and homegirl, Miss Ethel, did separate for a short time. Probably because of his little prostitute antics, because I wouldn't be tolerating that mess neither. Let's just be real. If you want the prostitutes, you can have the prostitutes. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have your prostitute and your wife. It wouldn't go well with me either. So I'm right up there with you. He also had issues with like stealing and theft and assault. I mean, like little petty crimes. He even stole a car from a priest. Okay, because that sounds like a great idea. To darken that up, I'm using the Tarte Hidden Treasures palette. And I'm using these two colors right here, this black and this like burgundy. Okay, so it's really unclear as to if he was doing these petty crimes while he was married, because him and Ethel did reconcile after their short time apart. I guess she was like, hey, let's give it another go and see what we can come up with and if we can work this out. And it seemed the time away seemed to be something that was good for the both of them. And I guess she either decided to deal with him or they just didn't have sex. I'm not really sure which one. They didn't talk about that, but they were married for a while. And to straighten up anything, we're going to be using the Better Than Sex liner by Too Faced. Like any murderer, yeah, I'm going to talk slower because, yeah, while I'm doing liner. Like any murderer, he progressed from petty theft and stealing cars and things of that nature. He moved to murder. Now, this is about 23 years after his marriage to Ethel began. Also, we're going to use this to tighten up anything. So, his first marriage was Ruth First in 1943, and she was 21 years old. She was allegedly a sex worker, so like a prostitute, which makes sense because he frequented prostitutes. Though Christie did describe her as more of a lover than a prostitute, which, I mean, potato sometimes. They had multiple sexual encounters. And then on this one evening in 1943, the sexual encounters progressed to where he actually had strangled her. They had been playing with that whole breath play type of thing. But this time it took it too far and he did end up strangling her to death, which was really arousing to Christie. And this made him like really, really sexually gratified. Like this was the biggest sexual gratification that he had ever gotten. And so after he strangled her, he did have sexual relations with her corpse, which is also known as necrophilia. And then he disposed of her body. Certain bodies we don't really know where they were found. However, after this, he did devise He was like, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to get my kicks, and this is how I'm going to devise a plan to do so. Because he was like, this is not just going to be a one-time thing. I really enjoyed this. So what he would do is he would call off work and be like, I'm sick, okay? I'm sick. And to help with his case, being sick, he would also visit the local doctor and get a note. So he would definitely have all his bases covered. Of, okay, I'm sick, and now I have a note, and so I can be away from work for a certain time, a certain amount, okay? And with his illness like established, this did give him time to cultivate his crime. He was able to find the person that he wanted to kill them, and dispose of their body, and then go back to work, all happy and gratified with what was going on. The primer, we're going to use Plump Right Back by NYX. I just really like the way this stuff feels. So anyways, he didn't just like, it didn't seem like he was raring at the gate to murder constantly, because at this point in time, you know, he's still married. Maybe he was trying to keep it under wraps from Miss Ethel, but he did, and he managed to do that. For our foundation today, we're going to use Too Faced Do You, and this is in the shade Nude. I use a lot of their stuff in the shade Nude. Like, pretty much with Too Faced, you can go with your shade in everything. Like, if they bring out a new foundation, you can just say, okay, I'm nude, so I'll go grab that shade, and it's consistent, which I really, really, really appreciate. So this is going to be a little tricky putting on this because of this, so I'll have to go around it and come back, okay? Anyways, so it took him another year to commit another murder, and I'm saying it like that because at times, once they start murdering, they just take off with it, you know? And they're just like, this is it, I'm going. And they go full force into it. But he did take another year to commit another murder, which was really interesting to me. But in 1944, he murdered a 32-year-old woman by the name of Muriel Eddy. She was actually a work colleague of his, which you shouldn't poop where you eat, but apparently he didn't get that memo. And how he lured her in was he said that he had a cure for her bronchitis. Now, by the way, he would say that he had credentials to do a whole lot of things that he didn't have credentials for. And one of them, and like he was some sort of kind of half doctor or whatnot, if you get what I'm saying. Like, he acted like he had these extra credentials, and he really didn't. He really did not have them. Nope. But he said he did. And back then it was a little bit harder to kind of prove if you had a if you were a doctor or not. Pretty much, if you said you were a doctor, you were a doctor. If you said you were a dentist, you were a dentist. It wasn't like people questioned it a whole lot, especially if you had like the garb or any of the uniforms, or even a little bit of knowledge to it. People just believed you, which was very dangerous if you think about it. You know, anybody could be a doctor and they could open you up and nobody would ask questions about it. Well, he took advantage of this, and he said, yeah, I can cure your bronchitis. And so if you come by my place, which was his flat, he would say, if you would come by my flat, I can hook you up, basically. So he had come up with this concoction that was hydrogen, and Also, then there was, and it had a tube in it, and there was another tube that had went to water to conceal the gas smell, and he would put it into like a gas mask and be like, okay, you know how when you go into the doctors or for surgery, it's like, okay, now count back from 100 or whatever, and he would have them do this, and then especially, and she was knocked out. It would knock them out, of course. I mean, how many times have we heard of them? Not hydrogen monoxide, carbon monoxide. Ignore my mistake there, carbon monoxide, because my brain stopped working on that, obviously. But so carbon monoxide, I knew it wasn't sounding right, but you know, how many times have you heard of people like falling asleep in their cars in their garage and then they passed away because of it? Well, carbon monoxide, yeah, and it also had a smell to it. I don't like the smell of like cars, especially when I get behind one that's leaking this stuff. I'm like, I have to go around them because I just can't handle it. Per usual, I'm going to use 3 shades of the Too Faced Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer this way: Nude, Porcelain, and in Swan. And we always start with Nude. So after he gassed her and she was unconscious, she wasn't dead, but she was unconscious, he ended up strangling her to death. And then after he strangled her, he did perform necrophilia, have sex with her corpse, because I can't seem to say necrophilia without taking forever to say it. And there are 3 types of necrophilia. Did you know that? There's like a romanticized one. There's, I can't remember right now, but in another video, I'll try to go over that. Because I thought it was really, I was like, there's multiple types of necrophilia. Okay. That's new and special, I guess. So his cure for her bronchitis was death. And I feel bad for her. She did not know that it was coming. She really just wanted to have a cure for her bronchitis. That was in 1944. Well, he took like a mini break for like a couple of years. Now, that doesn't mean that he took a complete break and stopped visiting prostitutes. I highly doubt that was the case. I just mean that there is no other murders during after this one for about 5 years. He was just on a hiatus, I guess you could say. Took a little breaky break. Well, during this time, just having time with his wife and hopefully working on his marriage. Being that they lived at 10 Rillington Place by now, this was in Notting Hill, and it's not the romanticized Notting Hill that we think of from the movie Notting Hill. No, it was more of a impoverished area, and I'll try to put in like little clips of what it looked like back then. But yeah, it was more impoverished and just kind of like the lower class and at the time, and that's where they had lived. Well, so someone else moved in on the 3rd floor, and it was a young couple by the name of Timothy and Beryl Evans. They had a very small infant daughter, and her name was Geraldine, and she was about 15 months old, maybe a little bit younger. Well, they had a really crappy marriage. They fought a lot, and they just did not get along. And so he would hear them fight through the walls, and people actually would call the police on them because they would have such bad fights. And they moved in about 1948, so yeah, we're like 4 years after his last murder. And so they're fighting, and they're having their own marital issues. This is the Becca Under Eye Setting Powder, and we're going to use the Too Faced Ethereal Setting Powder as well. But before we set everything down, I'm going to use some She Glam blush and highlighter. This is the highlighter in Vanilla Frost and the blush in Rose Ritual. And I'm also going to use the NYX stick, the NYX Wonder Stick for some contouring. they were both, like, Timothy and Beryl, they definitely both had issues with each other, because it wasn't just one or the other that would have the fighting, and it's not just one of them that would get the police called on them. It was both of them, because they did both have they were both pretty dang volatile. And so they would have verbal and physical confrontations with each other, and people, it, like I said, it was just, people could hear it everywhere. And so if people could hear it, so could John and Ethel. They started to calm down a little bit to Timothy and Beryl. You know, they had a sweet little baby girl they needed to take care of. Well, then they found out that Beryl was pregnant again, and they just were already having some financial issues and could not afford to have another child. And the way I look at that is, if you can't afford to take care of a child, then maybe you should have thought about how you made the child and maybe not do that or find other ways. But no, they were pregnant again, and neither of them were thrilled over this at all. And that's sad, but they were not thrilled. And so they were trying to figure out what to do. And back then, you really didn't know that you were pregnant until you were probably decent amount of time along. So this was 1949 by the time they had found out they were having another child. And it was like, oof. So nice and helpful John Christie found out this little tidbit of news and was like, catching Beryl outside, like, hey, I can help you with this little conundrum that you have going on. I know how to do abortions, and I can help you with that. This is one way that he lured people in, was saying, hey, I can help you with an abortion. Because at the time, they were very much illegal, and so it led women to go to different lengths. So he was just like, oh, like, this was like his advantage point, you know? He was like, yeah, I can lure another woman in. And because he hadn't killed by now, this was like going on 5 years, so he was getting the itch. And so he did. He lured her in to his abode. And I cannot tell you where his wife was at this point in time. I really don't. Was she working? Was she out? She didn't know about all this that we know of. We don't think she knew anything about this. While her husband allegedly was out of the house, Beryl was ready for her abortion, and what she got was gassed with his little concoction of carbon monoxide instead of the hydrogen monoxide. I don't even know what that's probably not even an element. Here I am making up new elements on the chart. But he lured her in, he gassed her, and raped her, again with his whole I need to be all dominant thing, remember? He raped her, and then he strangled her. He probably raped her and strangled her at the same time. Then disposed of her body. But you see, this was a problem. People actually wondered where she went. It wasn't like she wasn't loved. People actually just wondered where she went. And this is where things get a little bit different. You see, Timothy, her husband, had been saying that he didn't know where she was. Like, he almost had been making excuses to where she had been, even though she wasn't coming home or any of that. He hadn't seen her. So people were like, okay, why was he making excuses as to where she was? Because guess what? You know, bodies do smell after some time, and the police were called. They investigated the 10 Rillington Place and actually found Beryl's body in a shared outhouse. That's another thing. It's like, it's a shared outhouse. Somebody found them and then called the cops. It's not like it's just like, oh yeah, and nobody's going to ever find this. Yeah, no, somebody found it. Not just that, but they did end up also finding the body of the 15-month-old Geraldine Evans as well, but she was behind the outhouse. Yeah, sorry, I didn't give a warning today, so it's usually down in my description, and this is a true crime video, so things do get kind of rough at times, but yes, this is a warning. This is little one's death. And because this couple was already known to have really bad like fights, naturally, who did they grab? Well, a husband, of course. They were like, hey, Timothy, where were you in the past this time? And why did you say that your wife has been just out doing things? Instead of, the fact is, oh, she's here in your outhouse, this joint outhouse, and she's been murdered. Not just that, but then they find the little baby girl with a tie still tied around her throat where she had been strangled. So they are like, yeah, Timothy, you are under arrest. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You're coming home to the jail with us. Okay? Now, it was come to find out that Timothy didn't really have a high IQ. He was actually probably would have been considered kind of disabled nowadays. And they think that the confessions that he gave, because he did confess, that they believe that they were coerced out of him and easily put into his head, like, you did this, didn't you? You really did do this. And he really didn't have any idea to say, or the common sense to say, no, I didn't. I really didn't do this. I need a lawyer. I wouldn't kill them. He didn't have the intelligence to do that. And I'm not saying that to be derogatory. I'm saying that because they said he had a low IQ, and I'm just pointing that out, that he was coerced, and most believe that he was coerced into saying that he murdered his family. And just so happens, guess who was the star witness? Why, John Christie. So with John Christie's testimony, Mr. Timothy Evans really didn't have a chance. And sadly, he was put to death. He was found guilty and put to death because of the help of John Christie's testimony. I mean, the murderer was right there. Not just that, but a little side note here. They talk about the investigation and how it was just basically overlooked, because where she was found was actually, there was one of his other previous victims had been buried, and their femur bone was sticking out in the garden. Yes, he actually buried his victims, six of his victims, in the garden of 10 Rillington Place, underneath floorboards, and in like a little cubby kind of hidden area behind like the kitchen cupboard area. Yeah, he was special. So you can imagine how that place smelled. But by now he'd only killed, what, three? And though some of them, they don't really know where, like 2 of them, they don't really know where they were buried. But this was kind of a really bad investigation because of the fact that it was right there in front of their faces. There was a bone sticking out of a garden that they had to walk past. They just totally missed the bone. And they also investigated around the area and still missed the bone. And it was said that Christie kind of found that funny and almost, like he was almost proud that they just overlooked his bone, the bone that was sticking up. Because it was prominent. It was actually sticking up. It was a femur bone. Femur bones are long. Think about it. That goes from your knee to your hip kind of thing. It's a big bone. So this thing was just sticking up out of the ground. Yeah, they totally just overlooked that and ended up killing Timothy Evans for the crimes of his daughter and his wife. And also, another note is, sadly, Beryl was found to be 3 months pregnant. So when she died, it wasn't just 2 murders, it was 3. Like, the entire family was taken out essentially once Timothy was put to death as well. And I'm using the Physicians Butter Bronzer to just add a little bit of warmth to my face. After this trial, Christie went on to continue living in 10 Rillington Place and continued to murder and fill up his house and areas with the bodies. One in which was his own wife, Ethel Christie, and she was 54. He killed her in her bed and then actually started selling off her stuff, like her wedding ring, her wedding ring, I think his wedding ring, a watch of hers. He just started really selling off all of this stuff. Like, he just didn't even care. He was done with her, I guess. He also emptied her bank account. So he's a real piece of work. Real good guy there. But he was not done yet. He had a few murders up his sleeve left before he was going to be moving on to anything else. Well, one of the murders was Kathleen Maloney, and she was 26 years old. Darken this in with all the powdering. And he raped and strangled her, again with the whole dominance thing. Miss Rita Nelson was 24, and she was murdered as well in the same fashion with the raping and strangling. And his last murder that we know of was Hectorina McLennan, and she was 26 years old. Now with her, she had a boyfriend that was near them, like near the area, and he did rape and strangle her, but to keep up appearances, he actually would talk to her boyfriend and be like, "Hey, how's Hectorina doing? I haven't seen her in a little while. She doing all right?" And that's what he would do. He would literally just talk to her boyfriend, who was Alex Baker, and Alex would be like, I haven't seen her. So he started thinking that she went back to Scotland and just didn't tell anybody. I guess that was good thinking on John's part, because nobody suspected that he was hiding her dead body. We're going to use a little Chic Glam. This is the Floral Flush palette. Well, in 1953, I guess he was just done. He was just done with where he was at. He was tired of it. So he decided to sell his lease in 10 Rillington Place and just kind of get out of it. He was just done. He was like, okay, I'm gonna leave here. And that's what he did. For highlight today, I'm going to use the Laura Lee Loose Highlight. I've had these forever and I've never used them, so I'm going to use them. And this is in the shade Sugar and Spice. So like I said, in 1953, he actually sold off his lease. Well, naturally, being a new tenant, you're going to start looking around and being like, okay, what can I do to my new house here? Really excited, got a new house. And, or new flat, as they call it in London, which I find really cool. So he was like, yeah, what can I do to decorate it, make it look a little bit more, me, put my touches on it. Well, while he was decorating, he actually had come across this little cubby hole. Now this is going to be a little different because unfortunately my video ended up cutting off and picking up the wrong areas. So you can still see me putting on the makeup, but you just don't have the narrative behind it. So what had ended up happening was that John Christie had sold the flat and the person was doing some remodeling. Once he did the remodeling, he found behind the wallpaper with some cubby holes, he found a total of 6 bodies on the property and called the police, stating that they were not his bodies and that he needed some assistance over there immediately. By now, Christie was heavily on the run. However, his run was short-lived. It only lasts 10 days, and he was found within those 10 days. And he did confess to all of the murders except for the murder of Geraldine Evans, the 15-month-old. He was still adamantly saying that that was not his murder. He did not do that, but he was also trying to do the "I'm insane" plead, though of course people who murder are not exactly sane, and they did find him competent, and so he was able to stand trial for the murders. He was found guilty on the murder of his wife Ethel and sentenced to death. Also, he was found guilty to Beryl and Geraldine Evans murders. Yes, that means 2 people were considered the murderers of the 2. He was hung for his crimes on July 15th of 1953, and in 1960s, Timothy Evans was given a full pardon for the wrongfully accused. Sorry for the screw up in my video, but thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's work on this together. Have a great day.